It does come down to diagnosis, right? Diagnosis aside, right? Most parents, most individuals, not just parents, but most individuals chase a diagnosis because what they're actually after is not, it's not necessarily money and acknowledgement. What they're actually after is they're trying to understand themselves. Any neurodivergent person that you'll meet knows that they've got something really valuable, but that's almost trained out of them, and they then very quickly from a very, very young age led to believe that they are a failure, right? What they don't know is because the current system and structure is just not set up for them.
How important is independence for someone? Because when we talk about speech and we talk about, finding your voice and being able to actively, be able to communicate in a sense, how important have you found that independence for someone has been with the stories and the journeys that you've been on with people?
Yeah, I think obviously communication is a fundamental skill that everybody needs in all aspects of their life. And often communication is the root cause of lots of different types of breakdowns in relationships and ability to access services and support. It all boils down to communication, right? Whether you're neurodivergent or neurotypical, whatever, it's always communication. And I'm glad you started with that question, because sometimes speech therapy very much focuses on solving a problem. But for us as an organization and for myself, it's all about empowerment to allow the person to become independent. And I've always believed that, and I've always worked in that way. And even coming to my own neurodivergence, for me, it was all about becoming as self-reliant and independent as I possibly could. And that was hard without having that support and guidance from an external source. But fast forward to today, and the real life example that I can share with you, that I'm really proud of, is I have 3 children, of whom 2 are confirmed neurodivergent. And when I see what they've achieved because they've had coaching, mentoring, and support from day one to accept how they think and how they work, and how that's allowed them to become really, really independent, I think the proof is definitely there for me to see that being able to give that early support and guidance has allowed them to navigate the world without their neurodivergence being a barrier for them. And I want that for everybody. And a really, really, really good example of how important that independence is that when my daughter was about 8, she was diagnosed with leukemia. And my daughter is autistic. So for her, being able to navigate that journey would have been far more challenging had she not been given that opportunity and support to become independent and to be able to feel empowered to be able to represent her needs and her desires and her wishes and her challenges. And even with all of that support, she was only 8, it was hard. But when I compare her journey to other children who were late diagnosed and sometimes diagnosed at the end of their treatment, that they didn't, the challenges that they faced were the challenges that Amaya managed to avoid, and that journey in itself is a challenge. So independence for me is about that itself, that empowerment of that individual, and I quite often use this phrase that when children are at school and they have SLCN or they have additional needs, we almost train and teach them and support them to get through the education system. but we don't think beyond that. Like, why can't they have their own businesses? Why can't they be inspirational figures? Why are we putting limits on their achievements? Well, we do that because it's safe for us, but we're not empowering them.
Absolutely.
So yeah, you started with a really powerful topic, and a really topic that I'm really passionate about. So
No, bless you. Thank you so much for answering that. And you're absolutely right. Why can't I think we get kind of mixed up a little bit with the aspirational side of it. If we have a child struggling in school, and then we could say you could be the next X, the next person, which is I think it's definitely inspirational for doing that. But we're all kind of, I feel the kind of the inspirational side of it is at different stages of someone's life, and who is inspirational at the younger age may not be the same person as we grow up. But I always find, and you put this so beautifully, is that when we're in the educational system, we're almost compounded in a way, and our confidence goes down. We're always on the back foot of, we're going to a lesson and we're struggling with this, we're struggling with that, and we're just trying to keep up. And I think if you can kind of support, as you have done with your children, which is incredible, and empower them, it gives them that kind of level playing field to then rise up and be able to.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not the skills that you think, like the skills that we've to help them develop are their own problem solving skills. It's been skills that's going to safeguard their mental health, help them to identify, because people who are neurodivergent are far more susceptible to mental health challenges. So it's about helping them from a very young age understand and realize what that looks like, and what burnout looks like, and how to identify the warning signs way before they even get to that stage. It's how to prepare and organize their day, knowing that they will have certain challenges and barriers that other children and their peers won't. The best example I can share with you was, so my eldest daughter, ADHD, and this is before her diagnosis. She'd already cracked this because, we've talked about ownership, right? And from a very young age, and she had her pencil case, in her bag, and she was prepared that she will forget her pencil case because she forgets all the time. So she had a backup pencil case, and that backup pencil case stayed in her bag and never came out. However, she wasn't leaving it to chance. She had a blazer pocket, so she had a backup set of pens, pencils, a bare minimum basically that she kept in her blazer pocket. Now, that is an example of an individual who has embraced the fact that they're going to forget. That doesn't make them stupid. It doesn't make them less worthy. It's just part of how their brain works, and they've embraced that and they've prepared for that.
Absolutely. I think that's remarkable. And that is life skills, and you can apply, insert something, something else within that side of it. If it's keys, having a spare key somewhere else, or, I'm forever leaving stuff and losing stuff, and it is having those life skills and those habits that you form. Why is it when we're talking about the educational side of it, and you mentioned so rightly so about mental health and burnout and things like this, and that we kind of almost sort of create that environment where it's harboring these things for children in in some educational systems, okay, and that they're really, really struggling, and then it's kind of kind of touched and helped in any way, shape, or form, and then it's okay, now we've got a problem, now we've got to try and find a solution for it. But that almost incubate kind of state that the child's in doesn't seem to be really kind of focused on. It's okay, now we've got a child that's struggling, we need to help. But that period of time where that child is in there could be a few weeks, could be a month, could be a few years, could be their entire school time, and we don't seem to understand that. We try and I guess firefight to find, we're reactive and not proactive in that sense. Would you agree on that?
I completely agree. And I think because the conversations, it does come down to diagnosis, right? Diagnosis aside, right? Most parents, most individuals, not just parents, but most individuals chase a diagnosis because what they're actually after is not necessarily money and acknowledgement. What they're actually after is they're trying to understand themselves. Any neurodivergent person that you'll meet knows that they've got something really valuable, but that's almost trained out of them. And they then very quickly, from a very, very young age, led to believe that they are a failure, right? What they don't know is because the current system and structure is just not set up for them. Now, my youngest daughter is 9. We've had these conversations with our children since they were able to understand that kind of stuff, right? From a very young age. We prepare them to fail, not because they are failures, but because the world is not designed for them. So I think part of the problem is that the conversation doesn't happen early enough. And also, we have this system that needs to work for everybody, because that's how we can contain it and that's how we can organize it. But actually, even within that, there's so much flexibility. And I think it's about the professionals and the people in positions for them to be able to take a step back and understand that, yes, that wasn't our journey. For other people, that journey needs to look different, and we need to create a system that facilitates all of those. So I'm a very practical, realistic person. And for me, if we're creating workplaces that are, that have to be completely adaptable for every single individual in every single way, let's face it, it's not sustainable for a business. It really isn't. However, what we need to be doing is identifying that strategies that work for everybody. And there are many of those. And if we get those right, then actually the system works for everybody without necessarily creating additional strain or stress for everybody else. So it's about identifying those quick wins. And one of the things that we do as part of our role as speech and language therapists is we do communication friendly environment audits. And we go into schools and we don't just talk about children with speech and language needs. We just talk about the environment and what the environment can do to facilitate communication. How the adults use language and how that facilitates communication or how that acts as a barrier to communication. But all of those strategies work for everybody, and everybody can use them, whether they are neurodivergent or not. And it's about highlighting those. But I don't necessarily know if we fully understood them ourselves. Like, AI is fantastic because it helps people with chaotic minds. It helps them have structure and order. And are we teaching our children early enough how to use the new tools that are out there that helps them succeed? It's about it's about being brave to have that conversation, to take a step back from the norm that we know.
Absolutely, I absolutely, completely agree with you. And when we talk about technology and AI and the advancements, I mean, I know there's a big push at the moment when we talk about how much screen time. We know we get if you've got it on your device, it'll pop up and say you've got 10 hours, 11 hours, 12 hours, or however long it is screen time. And you're like, oh my goodness. And then next day you're straight back into what you're doing. And I know some schools are trying to trial, reducing the amount of mobile phone usage. But I guess it's also just trying to understand, when we talk about AI and talk about tools and the modern day world, it does seem sometimes in the educational setting that it's kind of, the mobile phone, and I'm an advocate of reducing the screen time for certain things and all the welfare and the mental health inside of it. But we're almost alienating what the real world's like sometimes, taking away a device or taking away tools that they would use in everyday life to then say, okay, but today you need to be looking at the book, you need to be writing this down, and then come 3:30 when you break, you're back onto that. So it's almost two parallel worlds. You're almost training yourself in one aspect and then live in the real world with the other things that you have. And I think that's where the mismatch, as you mentioned before.
I've got a really good example of how our daughter's my daughter's high school, actually, whether the intentional thought went into this, I don't know, but they actually have struck a really good balance, and they don't have any rules around phone uses. The only rule they have is it has to be on silent. And the children themselves are really, really responsible. Now, I'm not saying that this is going to work for every single secondary school. I think it's something that they've created, and it's a trust and a relationship, two-way relationship that they built with the children over a number of years. And they've never had to say to the children, you can't bring your phones to schools, you have to lock them away. They've never had to police it because they've taught the children to self-police. But it goes back to our original topic of independence, really. Like, I feel at the moment with our high school education system, there's a lot of policing of children. And in fact, I remember visiting a prison and feeling the similarities between a prison system and a high school education system. So many rules, and so many of those rules feel pointless. And the problem with having so many rules is that you're always going to be in trouble.
Yeah.
Right? Because there's so many things to remember, and especially for our neurodivergent children, they get to a point where, you have children that burn out and are stressed, which I see, and then you have the other type who have just given up. They've given up on themselves because it doesn't matter what they do, they're upsetting someone or annoying someone, so they've just stopped trying. So that's the safest option. But teaching children and young people to self-govern from as early as possible is so important, because when they finish high school, it just suddenly stops. That self-governing stops, and then they're expected to just pick up. But if we've not taught them those skills from a young age, how will they develop those skills? Like, youth should be about making mistakes, right? It should be around getting things wrong. It should be around discovering what you're good at and what you're not good at, and it should be safe, right? It should be safe. Like, we should be able to fail. Failure is so important, and it should be encouraged, but learning from your failure is what also needs to be encouraged. And that's a skill in itself, that reflection. Somebody saying to you, right, you didn't get that, but let's look at that, let's talk that through. Do we have time? Is there enough time and emphasis placed on that?
Hi everyone, I'm Darren Clark, and I'm really excited to welcome you to this course on neuro-inclusion. Over the years, I've founded several businesses, spoken on stages around the world, and worked with organisations like Nike, Disney, Barclays and HSBC to help them build more inclusive workplaces. But the heart of everything I do comes back to one thing: helping people see neurodiversity not as a challenge to manage, but as a powerful part of human diversity. Throughout this course, we're going to explore practical ways to make workplaces fairer and more inclusive. From recruitment and onboarding to communication and well-being, it's not just about policies or processes, it's about culture. When teams understand and value how different people think, everyone benefits. My hope is that these lessons give you the insight, confidence and real-world tools to take back your own workplace.
School.
You're absolutely right with the failing. That is, you're such a young person and such a young mind, and you're still developing in that side of it. And if you are governed by rules continuously, you are, like you said, you're going to trip up. No, regardless, if you went into a workplace and was governed with how many rules of how to sit, how long to sit, what to study, what to regurgitate, what to to be able to relay back the information, you wouldn't be in that workplace very long. And you'd probably be saying, actually, this workplace doesn't work for me. I cannot, it's not inclusive. It just doesn't, it's almost like asking someone who's creative to just sit at a desk facing a wall for 9 hours a day and say, be creative. It's just not, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
You need to go out for a walk. You need to speak with the team. You need to see what I mean? And I think that environment, and the other thing that I think was powerful, what you touched on, is those life skills. And we are, as children, governed to tell every single move and every single thing that we've done. And then I always find when the school system ends, you are almost sort of pushed out into the world with no support. Unless you have family support or anything else, you are just pushed out into the world, and then it's off you go. And that's
absolutely
confusing.
And let's talk about like the marginalized communities, and that's people, anybody, race, ethnicity, gender, whatever aside. It's people who have come from backgrounds where they've never had that model to them. So if you come from a background where you've had nobody in your family that's worked before, or has worked in a professional environment and you want to go work in a professional environment, where are you going to learn those skills? Because most of us learn those skills from watching others, right? And I remember over the summer, my daughter came to do some work experience here at Chatterbug. And the night before, we talked through what that day would look like and what she would do and what she would say. And, and she knew to, this isn't sucking up to your manager, but she knew to go in and ask her manager, do you want a cuppa? And ask her colleagues, do you want a cuppa? Not because she's sucking up, because that's how you build connections and relationships. But we actively talked about that, right? And the thing is, at work, I've actually been reflecting on this far more since she's reached that age where she'll be entering the work environment. Do I want her working 9 to 5, sat at a desk for the rest of her life? As a parent, I don't want that for her. But what does that mean? That means she needs to make a decision around what her aspirations are and what that looks like, and the types of jobs that she can go into and what that will mean to her. So again, coming back to independence, it's empowering her to take ownership of that, build her plan, but take ownership of her own journey, because your employer can't do it all for you, right? And I'm sat here, I'm an employer who wants to do it all for you, but I know from experience that I can't. It has to be 50-50, and you have to want it, and your employer has to do their part. And that's where you hit the sweet spot. And one of the things, if anybody's listening, that I've been thinking about is that when my daughter goes to her hospital appointments, they have a personal passport. And that passport talks about all of her needs and things that might trigger her and things that she will find challenging. And so, for example, if there's red, a specific shade of red, I have to say, it will make her really, really anxious. And she, the red that you get on power buttons.
Yep.
She that makes her really anxious.
Oh,
right? So hospitals just knowing that red is a potential color that might trigger her and make it difficult for her. But actually, something like that in the workplace would be really, really empowering. But we need employers not to discriminate, because if I got that passport from somebody to say, hi, I'm a new starter, I just want to make you aware of X, Y, and Z, and whatever it is, I would embrace that, right? But I know many, many people who would be terrified to share that with their employers out of fear of discrimination, and that's real, and that's something that we need to continue to tackle, because there are far more people that can work, but that aren't working because the environments aren't set up for them, and actually they can quite easily be set up for them. Right.
Absolutely.
So when we go into hospital for a Maya, the sellotape comes up if she has to have a hospital stay, and the TV monitor that's right above her bed, not sellotape, sorry, masking tape, that gets put on top of the red power button. Easy, takes seconds.
And the impact of that is massive, because and I think you're absolutely right. If you're the general consensus of when you go into work into an organization and you are brave enough to mention that you have, say, dyslexia or ADHD or whatever kind of you want to kind of be able to to tell them, that fear. So you've either done this in the recruitment process and thought, I'm going to put it on the application form and I'm going to go through. Hopefully, if I get through, if I don't, then you're not too sure whether that was the reason or not, whether you got through or not. Or you go through the whole recruitment process, not mentioning it, get to the actual first day, and then you're nervous, then thinking, how inclusive is this? Is there anyone else that's mentioned it? You're sat on your very first day. What's the onboarding process look like? And it's those things. If you can create an environment that's inclusive from the actual job advert that goes out, and the company that portrays this, it makes it more welcoming for you to go in. And one of the things, like you said, working with loads of organizations across the world, I've seen, asking them that when someone goes in, the first thing they'll say, if I went in and said, I have dyslexia, the first thing they turn around to me and they say, okay, what can we do to help you? What do you need? right? I have absolutely no idea what I need on my very first day. In fact, I probably don't know what I need on the first week. I probably still don't know what I need in my first month. I don't know how your meetings run. I don't know how this does. Do you see what I mean? These are the things.
Yeah.
But the very
100%.
first day, what do you need?
Yeah. And you're absolutely right. This is why I believe that two-way relationship is really, really important. I think I'm not saying that we've got it right here at Chatterbug by any means, right? I have to put that out there. We're still learning, but that's the difference. We are willing to learn. And I can tell you about my like in terms of a leadership role, it was an absolute game changer for my team when I was more open about my neurodivergence, right? Because as a boss, I sometimes have real anxiety coming into the office knowing that I'm going to have to say hello to people, right? So I'm ADHD, autistic ADHD. But then there's other days that I come into the office and I'm like, hi, everybody. That is so confusing. That's a mixed message to give to your team. But the minute I explained ADHD, and this is what that means, game changer, right? They know to read the signs, but I feel so much more comfortable being able to just be myself and embrace how I am. And the other one that's always been a little bit of a challenge and can come across aggressive is my need for why. I can't make sense of something until I've understood why. So I have to ask that question. And over the years as a leader, I've learned ways I can soften that why, but I needed time to understand that that was a challenge and to develop that bank of resources. Now, I've done that independently of my own back through failures, through people becoming upset, for people becoming frustrated and angry with me because I'm being aggressive because I keep asking why, and and they're seeing it as a challenge. There's been multiple failures before I've got to this point. So it is a 50-50, but the 50-50 here is being open and the team understanding that I have a different style of communication, and this is my presentation, this is what my challenges are. It's that, and I'm very fortunate that I have the confidence to do that, and I've had a long time to develop that confidence, and it all started from being the underdog. And when you're the underdog, you either thrive or you die, don't you? And I guess for me, I've just been very fortunate that despite being the underdog, I have found ways to continue to thrive. But what you said about not knowing what you need, I still have days where I don't know what I need. And also with women, and I'm sure with men, as you age and grow and hormone changes and all of that, you've got to contend with all of that along with your neurodivergence as well, which will change along with that, right? So there will be times where you're far more sensory than others. And that's going to pose challenges. So I think what people like is nice, neat boxes.
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately, people don't fall into those nice, neat boxes. And it's about being open that people aren't difficult for the sake of being difficult. Quite often, people are difficult because of the challenges that they're facing. And the most important thing is they may not even know about those challenges, especially if they don't have a diagnosis, or they're not even aware of that it even exists. So there's so many multiple challenges there, aren't there?
Absolutely. And you touched on a real kind of so many amazing points, but I'm just going to pick up on the fact, when you go into the office, and the most amazing thing is that you have communicated that with your team and said, look, this is, if I come in and I'm like, hey, that's great. But if I come in and I'm straight to my desk, then, that's another thing. And that's, and one of the things I've always found when I've had a corporate career beforehand, and then, when self-employed in businesses and bits and pieces, but I always remember going in, they call it kind of the water cooler chat. When you go to get some water or you go and make yourself a coffee and these things. And these ad hoc conversations from your boss or someone of seniority or it would come up, and they would just ask a quick question. They would just say, oh, how are we getting on with that? Or what does that look like? And it's in an environment where you're just sort of making a drink. but even if it's not even a question about the work, it could be something simple. It could be, what did you do the weekend? Now, for me, I would always backtrack. As soon as someone said, what did I do the weekend? I would just think, oh my goodness, I have no idea. I go completely blank. I have no idea what I did the weekend. So then I would think to myself, well, maybe I went skiing. And I would say something like, oh, I went skiing. And they're like, just the weekend? And I'll be like, no, I went dry slope skiing. Oh, where's that? And I'm in my head, I'm thinking, what am I doing? What am I doing? And it's that people pleasing, the nervousness of coming up with something elaborate. The thing is, they then ask someone else, oh, what did you do the weekend? And say, nothing much, just stayed in. And that was it. And I've just made up this massive elaborate story of skiing. And now every time I talk, they're like, oh, you still skiing? I've never skied in my life. And
the truth's out. Darren's never skied.
The truth is out. They're thinking, oh, he brought in those medals. But do you see what I mean? And sometimes I guess when we break it back, sometimes it's being put on the spot in these moments when you're not comfortable to answer these questions. Other times you can come in and you can be elaborate and have those conversations. But yeah, you're right. It's creating those environments.
That's really good, because a skill that I've mastered very, very recently is, and I think you could completely relate to this, is now if anybody says to me they want to just catch me for 5 minutes, I now ask them to tell me what the agenda of that conversation is. Because that is an anxiety causing trigger, because actually I have no idea what they're going to ask me, and they're not going to get any kind of resolution out of me, because they're going to have me on the spot and it'll be a panic response, right? But I've learned how to manage that. But again, it comes back to privilege. I'm in a privileged position to be able to do that now. But many people coming into the employment and into the workforce, they might not have that confidence. But actually, that's an easy one that will help everybody, whether you're neurotypical or neurodivergent. Wouldn't it be nice to know what the point of a conversation is going to be? Because then you know exactly when to respond. And those informal conversations are really, really hard. Like, I think for me, I've now, because over the years I've realized that when neurotypical people ask you a question, quite often there is another question behind it. I have to then think, right, so are they asking me factual information here, or is it something and some days you have the emotional capacity to figure it out, other days you just don't. But what I am much better at is no idea, I'll speak to you later. I can do that now, whereas I wouldn't do that before, and not worrying about how that makes me come across.
I think because that, like you said, having that, the confidence comes from the knowledge and the hard work that you put in, and all of the kind of the barriers that you faced, of struggling in workplaces or in education, or and all the, or with your team or anything else. Those all come from those experiences, and having the confidence to be able to do that. And you're absolutely right. If you were, I don't know, a member of staff in a non-inclusive workplace, and they said, Darren, I'd like to speak to you a little bit later. And I turned around and said, well, what's it about? If that manager or whoever is asking would deem that is, it could then turn into a confrontation. It would be, I'll tell you what it is later. And then you could then think to yourself, well, actually, I really need to know. But because the anxiety is building up in you, that could then be a case of, no, tell me. And then it's this confrontation. So then the meeting at the end, or whenever that is done, is, your emotions are through the roof. And as you mentioned,
exactly,
you get the best out of someone.
And I think it's like, as a neurodivergent person, we can keep wanting everyone to change for us and adapt for us. And that will take time, right? That does take time. And I remember my daughter, when she got diagnosed with leukemia, she says, Mama, why do you keep telling everyone that I'm autistic? And the reason why I was doing that was because before she was autistic, before the leukemia diagnosis, actually it was very much around her understanding herself and not burdening the world with her neurodivergence, and very much focusing on teaching her how to navigate that in this very non-neurodivergent friendly world. When she got diagnosed with leukemia, the priority was for her to survive, right? And just get better and to focus on that one thing. And I needed the people that were supporting her to carry the weight of knowing that she's autistic and they need to do something about that, not her at that point. So I'm almost now doing full circle, and I'm coming back to that point where if we suspect we're neurodivergent and we don't have a diagnosis, I'm not necessarily saying go out and get a diagnosis. I'm saying just take a moment to understand your neurotype, whatever you are. Take a moment to understand how your brain works and how you like to learn and how you think, and just damn embrace it, because that's work to your strengths, work to your powers, because that is what's allowed me to get to where I am today. Like the things that I'm involved in, when I chose the career of speech and language therapist, that's quite fascinating why I chose it. So I wasn't diagnosed until in my 40s, right? So I'm late diagnosed, but I've always known I was different. I assumed it was because I was an Asian person growing up, so minority growing up, speaking a different language. I thought I attributed to all of that. Neurodivergence was absolutely not on my radar at all. And one of the reasons, there were many reasons why I chose speech therapy, but one of the reasons is because I was fascinated by human behavior. I was fascinated by how people interacted because I didn't understand it. And that's one of the reasons why I think was drawn to this career. What I didn't realize that I would then be in a leadership position, or I'll be working on developing innovative tools like patient record systems and developing apps with a development team. I would never have been able to predict any of that. But because so much didn't make sense to me, I left it all open. I let the world take over. So I made decisions where I needed to make decisions. And also, I am so fortunate. I don't know how this happened, but I was born with this undeniable belief in myself. So when people told me I couldn't do something because I was a woman, well, that didn't make sense to me. When people told me I couldn't do something because of my ethnicity, well, that didn't make sense to me. And because none of those made sense to me, those weren't barriers for me. I just thought these people are stupid. That doesn't make sense. I can't do something because I'm a woman. But I am very aware that that isn't the experience for most people. I was just very, very, very fortunate. And I grew that and I grew that and I built that. But even though confidence was my natural given gift, I don't know what to call it, what I have done is learn how, in times where I have no confidence and belief in myself, to go and find that again. And there is a process around how to do that. And that process can be taught and it can be shared and it can be used by others. And I've seen that time and time again when that periods of my life where I just did not have enough belief in myself, I was able to go back and teach myself that self-belief.